In the heart of the African savanna, whispers of a haunting spirit echoed through generations. It was said that this spirit, known as Nyoka, manifested as a stunning young woman with eyes like emerald serpents. Her gaze was as enchanting as it was deadly, ensnaring the hearts of any young man who dared to meet her. Nyoka's beauty was a lure, her honeyed voice a trap, and each night she roamed the villages, luring unwitting souls into the depths of the forest, never to be seen again. Stories of how Nyoka ensnared young men abounded. One tale spoke of a hunter named Abasi, who, drawn by the sound of soft singing, ventured deep into the forest. There, he found Nyoka, seated on a stone, her long fingers tracing idle patterns in the air. "Come sit with me, Abasi," she purred, her eyes holding his. He felt an unseen force pull him, compelling him to drop his bow and sit beside her. His family found only his bow, and a few scattered footprints leading into the woods the next day. Another story told of Kwame, the son of a potter, who vanished after being seen speaking with a mysterious girl at the edge of the village's fields. Those who heard the story said he laughed as if in a trance, following her into the thicket, never to return. The elders shook their heads and muttered warnings. "Beware the maiden with eyes like a serpent." One evening, beneath the silvery glow of the moon, a young man named Kweku sat by the edge of a quiet pond, casting his fishing line into the cool, dark waters. His family depended on him for their supper, but the fish had been elusive lately. The night air was thick with the chorus of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl, wrapping the scene in an eerie stillness. As he sat in silence, the soft rustle of leaves caught his attention. He looked up to see a vision so striking it seemed unreal. It was Nyoka, her ebony skin glowing under the starlight, her eyes capturing his gaze and holding it tight. "You fish so diligently, Kweku," she said with a smile that made the night air feel warmer. Her voice was soft, beguiling, a melody he wanted to hear again and again. "Thank you, kind stranger," he replied, feeling his heart thump in his chest. Each day, Nyoka returned to the pond. The second day, she brought with her stories of distant places, weaving tales so vivid that Kweku felt as if he could see the glistening rivers and hear the calls of birds she described. He listened, enraptured, his fishing forgotten. "Have you ever wished to see beyond the hills, Kweku?" she asked, her eyes narrowing with a playful glint. "I have," he admitted, his voice soft. "But my family needs me here." "Oh, the world is vast," Nyoka whispered, leaning closer, "and full of wonders you can't imagine." By the third day, their meetings grew more familiar. Nyoka sat at the water's edge, watching him intently as he fished. When he pulled up an empty line, she tilted her head and chuckled, the sound both endearing and unsettling. "Perhaps the fish sense something," she said, her voice carrying an undercurrent of mischief. "Or perhaps they know better than to tempt fate." Kweku laughed nervously, a shiver running down his spine. Yet he found himself looking forward to her visits, even if something in the back of his mind whispered caution. By the fourth day, Nyoka seemed bolder. She reached out, brushing her hand against his arm. It was cold, like the waters of the pond at midnight. "You're different, Kweku," she murmured, eyes searching his. "You listen. You're kind. And you are mysterious," he replied, a half smile on his lips. But that night, as he prepared to fish, Kweku remembered a story told by the elders. Salt, they said, was anathema to spirits. He glanced at the small leather pouch in his hand, filled with coarse grains. He decided to carry it, partly out of caution and partly to ward off any misfortune that might explain his dwindling catches. When Nyoka appeared that evening, there was an unnatural tension in the air. She approached with her usual grace, her movements fluid and deliberate. But as she drew closer, her eyes darted to the pouch hanging from Kweku's belt. Her pupils narrowed into slits and her face twisted with sudden anger. "What is that?" she demanded, her smile vanishing. Kweku, confused and alarmed, quickly stashed the pouch away. "I'm sorry, Nyoka. I meant no harm," he said, hoping to soothe whatever had upset her. She glared at him, her gaze a molten fire, before disappearing into the shadows of the forest. The following day, Nyoka did not appear. Anxiety gnawed at Kweku's heart, and curiosity tugged at him until he ventured into the woods, seeking the spirit. As twilight descended, he stumbled upon a dark, yawning cave, hidden beneath a tangle of roots and vines. From its depths came a slithering noise that made his skin crawl. Out of the darkness, a massive black serpent emerged, scales glistening like onyx and eyes glimmering a sickly green. The serpent coiled and shifted, and before his terrified eyes, it transformed into Nyoka. Fear flooded Kweku's veins, and he stumbled back, sprinting toward the village with a tale that chilled every listener. The village erupted in alarm. Men gathered with pitchforks and torches, their faces pale but resolute. They marched into the woods, but Nyoka was waiting. She unleashed dark magic, summoning spectral serpents to twist their blades into rust and snuff out their flames with a single breath. "We must outwit her," Kweku said, breathless from their failed attempts. Days passed, and Nyoka cast her vengeance upon the village. The crops withered, maize shriveled on its stalks, yams cracked and turned to dust. The once fertile land became dry and cracked, spiderwebs of parched earth stretching out under the relentless sun. Livestock fell ill, their thin frames pressing against skin. Children's cries echoed through the empty market, and the elderly murmured desperate prayers with trembling lips. One evening, as Kweku sat beside his wife, despair etched across his face. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Kweku, we cannot let our children starve," she said, voice trembling. "All we have left is salt from the old cupboard." Her words struck him like lightning. Salt, the very thing Nyoka feared. His eyes widened with sudden realization, and he stood abruptly. "The salt," he whispered, a spark of hope igniting in his chest. Turning to his wife, he said, "Tell the villagers to gather. We have a plan." He called the villagers together and explained the power of salt, recounting his encounter with Nyoka when she recoiled from it. They scraped together every grain of salt they could find, forming a wide circle around Nyoka's lair. Kweku himself rolled a barrel filled with salt and explosives to the cave entrance. Nyoka, from her lair, watched with a dark satisfaction that slowly gave way to unease. She felt the strain of the villagers' collective fear and rage. Then, one evening, she sensed something else, a shift in the air, a note of resolve that made her scales itch with discomfort. When the villagers approached her cave again, salt glistening in their shaking hands and Kweku at the forefront, a chill ran through her. Her eyes darted from one determined face to the next. Fear, sharp and bitter, coiled in her chest. "No," she whispered to herself, an unfamiliar tightness gripping her throat. Memories of old stories surged forward, tales of spirits, powerful and proud, reduced to nothing by the very substance the villagers now held. "You think you can defeat me with mere grains?" she spat, summoning dark tendrils that slithered to the cave's entrance. But as they crossed the barrier of salt, they recoiled, hissing and dissipating like smoke. Her power faltered, and the realization gnawed at her. She was not invincible. The dawn sky was stained with crimson when Kweku lit the fuse, and the spark hissed along the cord, racing toward the barrel filled with salt and explosives. The villagers watched, breath held, as time seemed to stretch unbearably. A sudden, deafening explosion shattered the dawn silence, sending tremors through the earth. The entrance of the cave erupted in a plume of white dust and flames. A heart-stopping roar echoed from the depths, and moments later, Nyoka emerged, writhing in agony. Her serpentine body blazed with a fierce green aura, flames licking up her scales, turning them molten and cracked. Her emerald eyes, once cold and hypnotic, were now wide with pain and desperation. "Mercy! Mercy! Mercy!" she screamed, her voice breaking and raw, echoing over the stunned villagers who scrambled backward, fearing the touch of the spectral flames. But the salt clung to her, searing her form like an unforgiving vice. She twisted and thrashed, coiling and uncoiling as if trying to shed the very skin that burned. Kweku stood, sweat trickling down his temples, his heart heavy yet resolute. The villagers looked to him, their savior, as Nyoka's pleas for mercy diminished into strangled cries. The mighty serpent's body writhed one final time before collapsing into a smoldering heap. The emerald flames flickered and died, leaving only the acrid scent of charred scales and silence. As the first rays of dawn spilled over the horizon, bathing the village in golden light, the spell that had gripped their land was broken. The crops that had withered seemed to stir with a newfound vitality, and hope flooded back into the hearts of the people. Kweku, exhausted but triumphant, was hailed as a hero. The villagers encircled him, their voices rising in songs of praise, celebrating his courage and wit that defeated the Great Spirit. And for generations to come, they would tell the tale of the young man who stood against the serpent spirit and brought peace back to their home. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed the content, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more content. Drop your thoughts or questions in the comments section below. We love hearing from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.